So we're going to go ahead and start. Thank you, everyone, for attending this conversation tonight. My name is Charles Johnson. I am the second vice chair of Community Board 10 here for Central Harlem. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending Community Board 10's faith-based conversation about cannabis. Important conversation to have in the community, and we're in uncharted territory right now. So this is the first series of this nature here in Harlem. So we're looking forward to continuing this. These conversations really helped to educate Harlem's faith-based community while discussing benefits and impacts that cannabis legalization will have in Harlem. The event series is a three-part series that aims to equip Harlem's faith-based community with the knowledge to navigate the new landscapes as they continue to work of revitalizing the health and well-being of the Harlem community. This is the first of a three-part 90-minute event. And this particular event will start off with a speaker that will give a brief history of cannabis prohibition in Harlem, followed by engaging panel discussion where questions from the faith-based community will be answered. So let's go ahead and begin with the opening poll. So as you guys see right here, it's a quick opening poll. If everyone could participate with this, I appreciate it. It's just to kind of get an idea of, where you are, where you're from, what brings you here. Are you coming from the faith-based community? Are you a community worker, community educator, student, etc.? Yeah, I see you guys are answering 18 of answers so far. So thank you. I just want to give you maybe a minute or so for everyone to respond to the demographic poll. See, so far we have 26 responses. Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for participating. So I see we got about 50% of the demographics here, community-based organizations. So welcome, thank you all for participating, because this is for, like I said, the community. Faith-based organizations, 23%, so that's good. A community member, 54%, community educators, 19, 31% students, so I'm glad students are here, and educators, teachers, 19%, and a healthcare professional, good. So we have we have a good mixture of what we wanted for this particular conversation. So I'm really hoping that the questions and the presentations that are going to be provided really answer some of the questions that you guys have, and we continue this convo. So next, I wanted to before I want to acknowledge our partners for this event. We wouldn't have been able to do this without these people or these organizations. So I wanted to give a special thanks to Harlem Business Alliance, Marcus Meets Malcolm, Harlem Congregation for Community Improvement, HCCI, and a special shout out to Harlem Health Initiative, HHI, CUNY School of Public Health and Health Policy. They've been instrumental with helping with this. But I could not go further without giving special thanks to two special ladies who have been instrumental with just working in this space. I've had the pleasure of working with them in this space, and I look forward to it. So thank you, Dr. Smith, Cheryl Smith, who is the chair of the Economic Development and Technology Committee for Community Board 10. And thank you, Regina Smith, who is the deputy director for Harlem Business Alliance. Oh, and I also have to remember, I apologize, you all. We did not, as Tamisha and I were organizing this, we did not think about Ramadan. So I wanted to acknowledge Ramadan, happy Ramadan, and I apologize for individuals who are celebrating Ramadan, and this fell on your holiday. So I just want to make sure we tell everyone who's celebrating it, happy Ramadan. All right, so real quick, you guys, before we start, just a grounding exercise. Right now, we're about to have a courageous conversation. Like I said, we're in uncharted territory. So this is something what we call 4 agreements of courageous conversation. And this is something that we all want everyone to, kind of be in agreement with as we move forward in this series. So the first is to stay engaged. Staying engaged means remaining more morally, emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in a dialogue. In order for this to be a productive conversation, we need that from everyone. So, like I said, we really hope for everyone to stay engaged in this piece. The second agreement is to experience discomfort. This means that this pretty much means acknowledging that discomfort is inevitable, especially in these type of dialogues, and that partnership makes a commitment to having to bringing issues like this into the open. So again, we're dealing with the uncomfortable conversation, the elephant in the room, years of trauma as well. And during this series, there are going to be you may experience discomfort because again, we're talking about things that we have not discussed, but we know that we need to discuss. So again, we just want you all to be prepared for that during the course of this series, but it's going to be in a constructive, productive format. And if we continue to follow, like I said, staying engaged and connecting and being respectful, we should be fine. The third one is speak your truth. That means being open about thoughts and feelings and not just saying whatever you think others want to hear. Again, in order for us to be productive in this conversation, we really need people to speak the truth. We really need to hear from the faith-based community about what they experience or what their thoughts are, as well as individuals who advocate for this to understand what's going on. We don't really want yes men in the conversation. We want to make sure that people are speaking their truths. And lastly, expect and accept non-closure. So this agreement asks participants to quote unquote hang out in uncertainty and not rush to quick solutions, especially in relation to this type of conversation, which requires ongoing dialogue. So again, we're not going to be able to address everything in this 190-minute session. That's why we plan on having a series and continuing the conversations. But we want people to expect and accept that this is not going to be, fixed in one night. This is going to be an ongoing thing, and that's the purpose of this conversation. So next, I wanted to go into just using just some technicality things, using the Q&A features on the Zoom. As you guys see here, first you would log into the Zoom meeting, but if you want to do a Q&A or question, you would select the Q&A button at the bottom bar on the screen as you see circled. And if you don't see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, I'm sorry. If you don't see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, select the More option and choose Q&A from the menu pop down. So as you guys see right there on the orange arrow. All right, so just continuing with it, once you've located that area, then you could type your question into the box of any point during the presentation. You can choose whether you would like to submit or anonymously by checking the box. As you see here, you can, and only the presenter and the host will see your questions until they're answered. Go to the next slide. Okay, now this is where we've all been here for. I have the pleasure of introducing this incredible individual, Dr. Fullilove. Dr. Fullilove is a public health researcher, civil rights activist, and a pioneer in the substance abuse and addiction research space. He is providing over 60 years worth of knowledge, insight, research, and perspective. So we all felt that this is the perfect opportunity for a moderator of his caliber to be presenting at this first time event. So the floor is yours, Dr. Fullilove.
And good evening, everyone. So happy to have you all here. And perhaps like me, you're absolutely astounded that we've come to this point in our history. Many of you probably who've been through the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s recall when cannabis/marijuana was a substance that could get you arrested. The idea that we're now at a point where we can discuss not just its legalization, but its sale, its use in a variety of different formats to alleviate pain, to deal with a wide variety of medical problems. The notion that it might be the source of new prosperity for folk who are going to profit from all the things that have made this particular substance so popular, means that we're in uncharted territory. I think just about everybody knows that weed, cannabis, marijuana has been around for a long time. It is a plant. It is something that was often grown because its fibrous content made it perfect for all kinds of industrial uses. It was called hemp, and even George Washington grew it. It's, as you can see from the screen, something that has as its most important active property, THC, which, depending on the content, can be something that can produce a mild euphoric state, or when it's heavily laden, can be something that has almost incredible psychoactive properties. It is a substance that has many possible uses. Most of those in medicine are increasingly of fascination to those of us who have struggled with the world of drug addiction that we knew for the past 50 years, when many people became addicted to substances because they took drugs to alleviate pain. The idea that one of the uses of cannabis is a substance that will not only relieve pain, it is not something that becomes so addictive it becomes dangerous. The possibilities for its use are almost endless, but the possibilities for its misuse is also very problematic. I'm someone, as many of you know, who spent the last 15 years teaching public health programs in New York State prisons as a part of the Barred Prison Initiative. A substantial number of the young men and women who are part of my classes are doing time in facilities upstate because of their engagement with drug use, which in many instances began with cannabis. Is cannabis a gateway drug? A question that is asked to this day by many researchers in medicine and public health. Are we promoting a public danger, or are we providing folk with an opportunity to do something that has unbelievable, untested, and perhaps unlimited possibilities for well-being, for the treatment of pain, and for the expansion of consciousness in a way that many folk find to be absolutely necessary in the stressful times that we're in now? What will be the ultimate result of the process that the United States is going through, with many states like New York increasingly legalizing this substance so that it is now routinely available? The state of New York is now a state where you are allowed to possess 3 ounces of marijuana or 27 grams of concentrated marijuana for your use. It is no longer criminalized. A substance that used to wind you up in jail is now something that is routinely available, and there are problems that have been associated with its use that are just now coming to light. Colleagues of mine at the Mailman School of Public Health have done research that suggests that in states where marijuana use is legal, the increase in the cases of asthma that we're observing amongst young people have gone up. Is there a cause and effect relationship? It's not certain, but those of us who are worried about the consequences of the legalization of this substance, and those of us in medicine who are really confident that we are on the threshold of something new and exciting, I think provides us with the opportunity in tonight's discussion to explore a wide variety of questions that have been raised by this change in the drug use horizon of the United States of America. A change in the drug use horizon here in Harlem, is where I live at the moment, which undoubtedly is going to have a dramatic impact on the future of all of us. I'm going to be joined by 6 other individuals. I'm going to ask them to each say a few things about themselves, the work they do, and their interest in participating in this conversation. And my hope is that in asking a bunch of questions that many of you prepared before this webinar, we'll not only have a chance to respond to some of the many issues that you've raised, we're also going to leave time for those of you in the audience to ask questions, perhaps based on what you've heard thus far, as we engage in a kind of a back and forth, doing our best to explore this issue and find out what in the future is there for all of us. The 6 folk who have agreed to join us represent a broad range of expertise and connection to the Harlem community. I'm going to read off the names. We have Queen Esther Mixie. We have Imani Dawson. We have Dr. Yasmin Hurd. We have Dr. Stephen Robinson and Apostle Dr. Stacy Ramos. A broad spectrum of science, faith communities, and community-based folk who are all interested in this topic and who I think have much to bring to what I hope will be an interesting conversation, perhaps a really suggestively interesting debate. And what I'm hoping at the end of all this is that we will all walk away a little bit clearer about what some of these issues are, and we'll be able to discuss them with our neighbors and friends as we contemplate what the future with a legalized marijuana plant will be in the community of Harlem. I see that Speaker Amani Dawson, because it's your slide that's up first, can I ask you to begin? Would you introduce yourself, say something about the work you do and your interest in this topic?
She was indicating that there's some echoing noted, so we might just want to move to the next one as she gets ready. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I wasn't sure whether or not that was me or whether that was the system. Dr. Stephen Robinson, someone who's worked with us here at Columbia in the past. Dr. Robinson, if you would.
Thank you, Dr. Fuller. I moved to Harlem in 1980 when I was a resident in internal medicine at Harlem Hospital. And after I finished that program, I worked for a decade and a half at the City College, at the Sophie Davis program, largely with the administrative staff and the dean at the time, George Lithcott, to develop what was a preclinical program into a fully developed and certified medical school. Now, it did not happen when I was there, but we laid the groundwork that later became the CUNY Medical School, which is an accredited medical school today. After my tenure at the City College, I worked for a time in Tanzania for about 5 years, where I was established an exchange program between the Institute of Medical Research in Tanzania and the Project Imhotep with the Public Health Sciences Institute at Morehouse College. Returning from Tanzania, my family relocated to California, where since 2010, I was working in a number of clinics to evaluate patients for the use of medicinal cannabis. As you may know, California was the first state in the union to legalize the medicinal use of cannabis in 1996. And this was a citizen-sponsored proposition, which superseded the role of the California legislature or the governor. And the citizens of California, through the advocacy of a number of groups, like veterans who had PTSD, patients with HIV/AIDS before there were effective drugs to deal with reducing the viral loads, parents of children who had autism or seizure disorders, cancer patients, patients with multiple sclerosis, all of these different patient groups advocated because they realized on their own, despite the ignorance of the medical institutions at the time, and despite the prohibitions of the legal structures at the time, that this medication worked for them. When I started working in the clinics, I talked to a number of patients, and the average age was about 50 to 60, who were using medicinal cannabis for their own benefit. These were not stoners, these were not hippies, or maybe they've been, the hippies who were aged out like boomers, like myself and Dr. F. But these were people who are now using cannabis for its medicinal benefit. Now, when I went to medical school, the only approach to marijuana, as it was called, was as a drug of abuse. None of the medicinal benefits or the medicinal characteristics had been studied or taught. So I had to begin my own process of self-education. And through that, I became aware of an organization called the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, which was started in California and is now got membership almost spanning the globe. The director of that program was the one who provided the medical language for the California proposition. There were a number of enumerated conditions like cancer, like HIV/AIDS, like multiple sclerosis, like peripheral neuropathy, that were designated in the proposition for people to use cannabis medicinally. But the founder, Dr. Todd Micarina, also added the line, or for any other condition for which the physician felt cannabis could be useful. And that opened up a broad range of conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, like anxiety, insomnia, migraine headaches, PTSD, opioid use disorder. So that this was a vast array of uses for which the physicians in California could authorize the use of cannabis.
30 seconds.
So I began to look at the history of cannabis. It's been a medicine documented in Egypt, in ancient China. It was brought to the West through the work of William O'Shaughnessy. It existed as a medication in the US pharmacopoeia since 1850, sold by regular pharmaceutical companies in this country. And the only prohibition began in the early 30s with the creation of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, headed up by Harry Anslinger, and that we get the era of reefer madness and a total amount of misinformation about the incorrect characterization of this medicinal plant.
Well done. Dr. Hurd, if you would.
Hi, thank you so much for having me this evening for definitely an important discussion. So I am, as I said, Yasmin Hurd. I am the director of the Addiction Institute at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. So in the community, and we definitely have a number of interactions where it's important for communities to interface with the hospital systems that are there to help to treat them. And we've had many, I think, tense interactions between the community and different hospital systems. And I think that that's why this particular program is important, to get everybody at the table to have these discussions, because the community involves everyone. So I am a neuroscientist, and I have been studying the effects of drugs on the developing brain, and also looking at the neurobiology of substance use disorders in general, in studying the human brain, in studying animal models, so that we can actually have, causal relationships to what we see drug effects may have in humans. That is it really true to the drug, or so many other things in our society, as we know, that can contribute to addiction risk and associated mental illnesses. And one of the things that I have been studying for a very long time, as I said, was developmental effects of drugs, and in particular cannabis. Because when we did, and as you mentioned, many adults who have a substance use disorder, many of them would start off with cannabis, as they do with alcohol or perhaps smoking cigarettes. So the term quote unquote gateway is pretty loaded, but it's just any drug that anybody starts with. As I said, it can be cigarettes or alcohol and cannabis. But because we actually, as a society, had been studying the effects of developmental alcohol, we knew a lot about it, the impact on the developing brain. We also knew a lot about the developmental effects of cigarettes, but there actually was not that much known about cannabis. So, as we just heard, cannabis has been around for millennia, thousands of years. So too has opioids and psychostimulants as cocaine. The difference is we actually thought we knew a lot about these drugs, but actual research has not been in depth. And so that's why it was very shocking when I started looking at what do we know about the neurobiology of cannabis. We really didn't know that much, and especially in regard to the developing brain. And we know that most people who have a psychiatric disorder, people may be diagnosed in adulthood, but their vulnerability starts during development. And so if we really want to attack disease, we need to understand the developing brain and start for early interventions. So often many people who are pro cannabis would hate me because they're like, oh, you're showing these, usually not positive effects of developmental cannabis exposure. But then I also started looking at the different cannabinoids in the plant, because people think of cannabis as one thing. It's not. It's a very complex plant with hundreds of chemicals in it. And when I looked at THC, I would see in our animal models that it had these negative effects. But when I looked at another one, cannabidiol, which now everybody knows as CBD, I actually saw that it could reduce opioid in our animal models, seeking behavior in our humans, craving and anxiety. So our studies were the first to show that, actual studies to show that a cannabinoid could reduce potentially opioid addiction. So for me, I use data to inform how we move further with making sure we protect individuals at risk, but also understanding that there may indeed be medicinal properties for this very complex plant, but it's not a one-to-one relationship. So I look forward to the topic and discussing it all with you.
Excellent. Much appreciated. Queen Mixie, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly, because I know French, le lièvre.
Yes, le lièvre.
Je
Yeah.
comprends bien.
Oui, je vous parle français. Ooh, sorry. Well, let's not change too much. Hi, I'm Esther Queen Mixie Lelièvre. I am the CEO of Queen Mixie Media and Mixie's Blossom. I'm also CEC in District 29. I also work at Brick Arts Media, but the most important in this space, I am one of the co-founders of Cultivated Community Foundation, which we have been doing educational workshops throughout the city or state of New York. And we have been a bridge in this space of connecting communities, legislators, state agencies, and giving education and re-education in this space of cannabis. So we want to be able to give as much education and know that people are heard and understanding, and giving them the right information and accurate information for them to be able to advocate for themselves. There's a lot of things that was said in here that I can't wait to have this conversation. In addition, we've also had experience having a faith-based conversation previously in Bed-Stuy. I don't know if they're going to be playing the video real quick, because that's all I have. Oh, there you go. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much. We're just going to let our work speak for itself. So we have a quick video. Cultivated Community Foundation, and we actually go into the neighborhoods and talk about cannabis. I think there might be some technical difficulty.
The curse of trying to play videos on Zoom.
I really hope that end of the video, because it would really help set the tone of the conversation. So I don't know if they'll go, or do you want to come back to it? I don't know.
Let me just say that the end of the video is someone who had been prescribed Oxycontin for pain, and was very clear that that was going to lead to an addiction that might be almost impossible to break. As someone who's worked in drug treatment programs, I really get how much pain medication has often been the route that people take to get to addiction. The idea that cannabis can have the impact on good health, the relief of pain, without the problems that are associated with addiction, I think were neatly summarized when that woman said, hey, it works for me. And I'm sorry that the video isn't there because I found it really impressive. It's just the wrong medium. The more folk you have, the harder it is for the video to have the traction it needs to play. Would you like to add
Yes.
anything just sort of in conclusion?
Yes, and that person was a pastor in this space, and in addition, a chaplain in this space. And in addition, they were also Reverend Kareem, who has been working with us in Bed-Stuy and in Brownsville, talking about what he had to relearn as a minister himself, and understanding and educating himself, and knowing the differences that are happening within the cannabis plant, and how he can be able to advocate within this space. So hopefully, if it doesn't play, I understand, but if it does eventually play, it's a good tone to understand where your colleagues are in this space. In addition, I know OCM has been working on faith-based coalitions where we can be advocates within this space as well. So there's an opportunity for our voices to be heard and for our questions to be addressed. And I also want to thank CB10 because they're taking the initiative and doing a cannabis forum April 18th with us to continue the conversation with the community and being able to talk to our youth, talk to our aging community. So thank you for having me.
And I do want to say that we will be sending copies of this PowerPoint and hopefully of that video. So if it doesn't play well in this space, I really want to urge folk to check it out when it comes your way. I think, again, for those of us who've been struggling with issues of pain, relief, and addiction, this is really an eye-opener. Thank you so much. Apostle Stacey Ramos, if you would, please. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. As you heard, I'm very excited because it already sounds so amazing. I am Apostle Dr. Stacey Ramos. I am a community pastor with the community church, Garden of Gethsemane Ministries, right in smack in the middle of Harlem in our great village. I am doing the community work and we are grabbing one soul at a time. I serve on various clergy and ecumenical platforms, as well as community-based leadership advocacy platforms in the village of Harlem and beyond. We also have Harlem Clergy Community United and Beyond, which is about all clergy, as well as organizations, as well as the neighborhood coming together to really encourage safe walking, to be eyes on the street, to talk to those that are on the ground and really bridge the gap. I'm interested in being here today. I am not the end all be all say all, as I just heard my sister speak very highly of who she's working with ecumenically, and I totally honor and respect that. But I am really on the ground. And so because of that, medicinal, I've found some really challenging details of how it works, when it works, why it doesn't work. I mean, I've educated myself, and I'm sure a lot of the faith-based organizations have as well. And then recreationally, it's just proven that it's showing truly that it is a situation. And I only say that because, again, bridging the gap, being on the ground, being in the young folks' spaces, watching what's happening and how this is being inhaled, ingested, driving under the influence, which is a major, major situation. The CDC has put out major reports. In fact, now there's been such a spike, even from USA Today, even the National Institute under the influence of marijuana has done that. So faith-based, we're trying to get folks focused. We're trying to get these young people educated and understanding and knowing, you know, what will benefit them in the future, as well as those that are not as young. And knowing, I don't so much think everybody's uneducated or needs to be aware of what's happening. I do think people are understanding. We have a platform of a group of folks here that definitely knows it and has it right, especially with you, Dr. Fully Love. But I do know that there is a process of bridging And I know the faith-based community has to do that bridging, and it has to be very clear as to what that looks like as opposed to what we are actually seeing. And so again, I'm excited. I have some details as far as medicinal as well as recreational. And last point I will say is I talked with a young fellow who was working for a company today, in fact, who would have thought it? And he was actually getting people to sign petitions to decriminalize recreational marijuana. And when I spoke with him more in detail, he was like, well, you know, I don't even really believe in it. I don't even really want to do it. I don't even think it's right, but I'm just doing it. I'm just following along. So I thank Charles Johnson for when he started this great conversation for saying, let's be truthful, let's be real, let's bring the facts, but let's also allow folks to share what they have, what they've learned, and what they understand, and let everybody receive what that is, especially as it pertains to the faith-based community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Always waiting for the next slide. Imani Dawson, have we heard from you?
We have not, Dr. Fully Logan.
Thank
Thank you so much for coming back to me. It is amazing to be here in this incredible space with all of these folks who are committed to getting education and helping us reframe how we see cannabis as a community in all spaces, including the faith-based space. And I am thrilled that there are 61 people on this meeting today. I literally just ran from a meeting with OCM. So this market is really, it's coming together in real time. And this conversation could not be more timely. I have been in the fight to legalize cannabis since 2017 as an advocate and also someone who is a communications executive and a strategist. This is really the essence of social change for me because one, I grew up in East New York in the height of, the drug war era. And I went to church. I went to St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, which has so much to do with why I'm here today and who I am as a person. Reverend Youngblood, now Bishop Youngblood, was incredible. He's my forever pastor. And so it is just, it's phenomenal for me to be able to be in this conversation. And I want to I know that there have been a lot of great things said. I want to talk about why we need to speak specifically to the elders who, when I go back to churches and I'm engaging, I still feel like I'm a young person in the space because there are so many of our elders there. I came into cannabis as an advocate and also as someone who became a patient, right? I watched my mother who was diagnosed with cancer self-medicate as part of her palliative care. And while she did pass away, it helped. I watched it help. I realized that cannabis was a medicine after a lifetime of being told that if I consume cannabis, the inevitable end was crack addiction or ruin of my life, the collateral consequences. Growing up in the 80s, I was very much that person. And so when I look at cannabis as a plant-based medicine and all of the sort of illnesses that it can help support, as a tool for wellness, like I really want to get information about cannabis as plant-based medicine to the elders who are in church to help one sort of help them rethink about cannabis as something that can be helpful to them and also to support, their own medical needs, right? Like I know people who are on 10, 15, 20 medications. If you can substitute cannabis or even CBD, if which is also from cannabis, but it's the non-psychotropic part, because I think a lot of people are worried about THC. If you can add that into your healthy regimen, I think it can improve your quality of life tremendously. And that's really what I want to see from elders and why I am here.
Excellent. I believe we've gone through just about everyone who is going to be serving on our Zoom-based panel. Am I correct? Have I gotten everybody? we've sort of been doing the back and forth. Well, let me, if I can, begin with some questions that I'd like to direct to Dr. Robinson and to Dr. Hurd. I think people are very concerned about, from a medical doctor's standpoint, when you look at the pros and cons that are associated with marijuana use, what are the things that you're most happy about now that this change is occurring? And what are the things that concern you most? Because as folk who've really worked with this, we've been very clear, it's not a panacea. It won't solve all our problems, but so will probably not take us directly to hell. I think trying to find some middle ground where we have some perspective, some balance on this, I think that's really necessary. And because the science of addiction is part of what you all represent, part of what, as physicians, you all are about, I think it would be great if you told us your own sense of pros and cons so that we can begin discussion with a kind of a clear notion of what are the problems, but what are the resources that are really at stake in this discussion. Because I asked both of you to speak, forgive me for being old-fashioned, Dr. Hurd.
Oh, absolutely.
You might be muted.
Thank you. Yes, I was saying Dr. Robinson can go first if he wants. It's fine, since he's been, as you guys have said, doing it a little longer.
Then Dr. Robinson, if you would.
Oh, age before beauty, is it?
Thank you.
Well, let me just say that this, to reiterate, that this has been a medication that has been used by humanity as far back as recorded history. The Ebers Papyrus, almost 5,000 years ago in Egypt, the Pen Tsao in ancient China, talked about how to cultivate the plant, how to harvest it, what kind of conditions it could be used for. And these were not cultures that were interested necessarily in getting people high. They were interested in emphasizing the medicinal properties of the plant. It's very interesting that even the ancient Chinese knew, and they recorded in their document, the Pen Tsao, that this plant is not poison. It is good for the 5 organs. It will help balance your yin and yang, but if you took too much of it, you will see white ghosts running around. And I think that there's some points that they raised. Number one, it's not poison. No one has ever died from a cannabis overdose because the receptors for cannabinoids are not found in the midbrain, which controls respiration and the circulatory system. Number two, this plant has a lot to teach us about ourselves, but the sophistication of the way the body is organized in the physiology is such that our technology had to advance to the point where we could even understand what was happening. The structure of THC, the main psychoactive compound, was only clarified in 1965. When our technology allowed that substance to be radio labeled to see where it went within the body, it went everywhere in the nervous system, the spinal cord, the GI tract, the liver, immune cells, and all of these places lit up. Further investigation showed that the body has its own receptors for these plant compounds called CB1 and CB2. And that led to the discovery of a vast regulatory, homeostatic, physiologic system that we had no recognition of before. So in 1992, we began to understand the body's own endocannabinoid system. Just like endorphins, the body's own version of morphine, fits into receptors that we have that can help for pain relief. An even larger system is the endocannabinoid system, where there are specific receptors that the body makes its own cannabinoids out of lipid structures in cells that fit into these receptor sites that's found in the nervous system, in the GI tract, in immune cells, all over the body, articular joint surfaces. So it is a vast homeostatic mechanism. And just like the Chinese says, it can help bring yin and yang back into balance. So from the standpoint of the phytocannabinoids, the plant itself makes over 120 cannabinoids in addition that are unique to that plant species, in addition to 60 or more terpenes, the aromatic compounds that you can smell that give the different varieties or different chemovars of cannabis its distinct aromas in different places that also have an impact on how these cannabinoids can interact with the body. Principal cannabinoid THC has been found to reduce pain at several layers within the nervous system, at the peripheral level, at the spinal cord level, and at the central level, where you get the affective component about pain, whether it's really bothersome or not. The opioids can also affect the affective component. People are aware that they're having pain, but it doesn't bother them. They're aware that they have it, but it doesn't become excruciating. So cannabinoids can also do this, and people have found that the combination of cannabinoids and opiates can reduce the level of opiates necessary to attain the same level of pain relief. When you look at states that have the medicinal cannabis programs in place, the largest population of people going to medicinal cannabis are often those seeking pain relief. So cannabis can help with that. And that in itself, when it reduces the need to resort to opioids, is a boon that can help undercut this opioid epidemic we're having now. Studies have been done to show that in states that have medicinal cannabis laws, there's been a 25% reduction in the deaths due to opiate overdoses. Now, I know that there's some other data that have come out that have questioned that, but clearly there is a real use for using cannabis as a drug to help doing pain relief, as well as one that can help reduce the use of opioids. So that's only one aspect. There are other tremendous aspects in terms of the help for PTSD, anxiety, insomnia, migraines, all because of the interaction of the various cannabinoids that deal with different aspects of our endocannabinoid system.
Well, thank you.
I'll stop here and let
Can I ask you-
Okay, should I? Yeah, can I give
Please,
my comment?
please.
Yeah, thanks. No, so every single thing, I mean, Dr. Robinson, I agree in terms of our history, as I said, of the endocannabinoid system. But I do want people to know it's not only the endocannabinoid system and cannabis that's been around, obviously, as I said, and you said, China, opium, cocaine, all these drugs have been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's just modern history where we have elevated the concentrations of these drugs, including cannabis, so that, you know, the indigenous people in South America who would chew the cocaine plants, they weren't pushing it into their veins. We changed the route of administration and we changed the potency. So we have an endogenous cannabinoid system, as Dr. Robinson said, endocannabinoid system. We have an endogenous opioid system for morphine, but that where morphine and opiates and oxycodone and so on binds. However, a very important thing, our endogenous cannabinoid system is not, and I'm going to repeat, not for ingesting these chemicals. And the reason why I say that is that how they function normally, the concentrations of our endocannabinoid ligands, the same way our endogenous opioid ligands in our brains and our bodies are very low in concentration. So they do modulate the homeostatic, keep us in homeostasis. That's why they're there. What has happened is when we take these chemicals at high concentrations, especially as we do today, they overwhelm our endogenous systems. So do they have medicinal properties? Absolutely, I believe that they do. Do we understand the medicinal properties, especially of the cannabis? No, that's why we're doing a lot of research. So I think the problem is that people think that something is either all good or all bad. And actually, it's not. It's called biology. Our biology is such that we had to survive. If we were inundated with high concentrations of THC that exist in most of the plants that are used recreationally and that you can go and buy in dispensaries, none of these stores are thinking about concentration of THC. And that's where we see the health risks are more associated with it. So for example, for every single thing, so now, ironically, because the increase in cannabis use, even in the UK, when you look at like hundreds and thousands of people that they've collected data on, increased myocardial infarction. So all the cardiovascular problems now associated with cannabis. We know that the mental health risk of high THC concentrations, potency, increased risk for psychosis and anxiety disorders and so on. Ironically, many people tell us they use cannabis to treat their anxiety, but it's low THC concentration that treats anxiety, not high. In fact, it does the opposite. It exacerbates their anxiety. It's cannabidiol, CBD, that we've been working on for a long time, when, as I said, nobody even knew what it was, that reduces the anxiety. So we have to be very clear. This is the first quote unquote medicine that is being voted on by our citizens and politicians who want to get elected. Medicine usually goes through a strategy to see what are the risks and benefits. What's the dose? We are saying, oh, we must add cannabis for our healthy regimen. But what dose, what concentration? And cannabis plants out there and the strains and have different concentrations of the different chemicals in cannabis. And actually, THC and CBD can even counteract each other. Many people think that, and they can even exacerbate the negative effects of THC. So depending on the concentration of the other chemicals in cannabis, you can get the opposite. We also know that there are individual differences. Not everyone benefits from cannabis. That's also the issue why you need research. That's why we look at, in large populations, being able to track people to see what medicines work for different people. That's why in commercials, you see they very fast tell you, blah, 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 these are the side effects, because every medicine on this planet, there's not one that does not have a side effect. So it's important, if we're going to call this medicine, when we have not proven that it's medicine, we know it has medicinal properties, but we need to make sure that people know that just because it worked for your neighbor, we have seen the same thing cause a huge problem for people. I have an 80-year-old woman who never did anything in her life, any drugs or anything. She suffered from intense pain. She took CBD, her pain is gone. She's skipping around and I'm like, you do remember you're still 80 years old. She now does a lot of things that she shouldn't be running around. But it worked for her. It didn't work for others. We're trying to understand what are the individual differences that can put one at risk while it may benefit others. But we do know it's because there are also different adulterants and different cannabis products out there that are not all the same. So it's important that we educate people that cannabis can be beneficial, but you have to go low in concentrations. Today, a lot of the young people, their brains are being blown out by a high potency THC. Trust me, that is not medicine. I'll stop there.
That was considerable. One of the things that I think we want to be sure to deal with, and this is a question I'd like to raise for Amani and Queen Mixie. A lot of states were very clear that they wanted to legalize this substance because of the money that it would generate. It is a popular substance. Once it's available for use, people will spend whatever money is there, and the tax revenues are known to be really quite considerable. I'm sure that that weighed in the thoughts of many members of our state legislature when they said, let's do this. But it has also been the case that in the communities where you had large numbers of people who suffered as a result of having marijuana, an illegal substance, because possession and sales put you in jail, these are also the communities that are struggling to get some share of the profits that are going to be generated when this new business comes to town. I think the real issue for a lot of folk here is, okay, it's here. Whatever else is true, like alcohol, which for many of us is a much worse drug, it's here. We've got to deal with it. The issue of how it's going to impact the economy of Harlem, whether or not there are going to be tax benefits that are going to flow from this, the issue of who should benefit from the things, the profits, if you will, that are going to be made with this. I think a lot of folk in the audience are really interested in that. And if it's not too difficult to question, Imani, Queen Mixie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm just going to jump in. I think I hear what you're saying. I think we're all kind of grappling with that, but I do want to provide some context around our laws here in particular, having worked as part of the Start Smart Coalition. The MRTA allocates 40% of the tax revenue generated by cannabis sales for communities like Harlem, like East New York, where I'm from, that were most harmed, most impacted by prohibition and the war on drugs. So there is money coming back. There's an advisory committee that actually votes on projects. There's an opportunity for community-based organizations to apply for revenue so that it can come and directly impact the community. So I think laws have been iterative. We've learned from other states that have legalized. And in New York, we have this incredible opportunity to see real-time benefits in our community just as soon as sales commence. Now, what we're dealing with in the community is a proliferation of pop-up shops. And, as a result of the big gray market opportunity where it's legal to possess cannabis, but, the actual licensing hasn't fully commenced. There are only a handful of dispensaries, adult use dispensaries open throughout the state. So when people go into those places, first of all, they're not even paying tax on the cannabis because it's illegal. None of that money is coming into the community. And that's an important distinction, I think, that needs to be made. The money is going to come back. The question really is, when are we going to generate enough revenue from cannabis sales for it to actually make a difference? And part of that has to do with our rollout. And when we get to enough cannabis dispensaries and sales for the tax revenue to actually make a noticeable difference.
Queen Mixie, anything to add?
Yes, and then within the tax revenue, I think 20% is also for substance abuse that will be given into that factor. But just to piggyback on what Ms. Dawson was saying, or Dr. Dawson, excuse me, was saying, is that, there's still going to be ways in which our community can contribute to working out this entire community of cannabis rolling out. There's a lot of areas, as we've been talking to the youth, as we've been talking to the aging community, and things are being put and bucketed into one area when they need to be separated. When we're talking about, the first, gateway drugs and all these different terminologies, most of the kids that we've had interacted and we've spoken to, that's not where they started. They actually started with vaping and those different instances. So I think the biggest factor is making sure that education is always on the forefront of this entire conversation. And the more we educate, the more our community can figure out where the social services are going to be needed in this space, where we contribute and where we can advocate and hold the OCM and our political leaders accountable, and the advisory board, making sure that that reinvestment money is coming back to our communities. It's in the places that we as the community need it for, because only, what happens, I'm in Southeast Queens, I've done work in Harlem, but every community has different needs and different issues going on. So even when we're talking into the schools or talking with the teens, every school has a different problem. And then we're all bucketing everything as cannabis use, that I really just want to address. I don't know if it'll be a question later on about kids in cannabis, and a lot of misconceptions because people are just generalizing the actual stores.
Ooh, we lost your sound.
Yes, and where these things are coming from. So making sure that we're putting the things in the right category so that we can find solutions and educate ourselves to be more proactive and being able to advocate in the places that we need to advocate.
Very good. I really have, at this moment, a real desire to hear from you, Apostle Ramos, just because I think it's very clear that of all the institutions in the community that has a voice that people routinely pay attention to, our faith leaders have got to have some say in all. Have got to have some say in all this. And I recall from your opening remarks that you have your doubts. I mean, you're willing to be very open about this, but I know that as you hear what's been said and as you think about all the things that have to be considered, how we get the faith community involved is going to be critical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Man, I wanted to jump in like hopscotch, y'all. I wanted to jump in like double dutch, Queen Nixie. I wanted to jump in, Dr. Hurd. This is real talk on today. We got to have more conversations. I thank the leadership for putting all of this in. And
you went on mute.
Keeps coming just when I'm trying to speak, right? Just when I got something to say, right? Your phone. But I'm going to be brief. Yes, to answer your question, absolutely. I honor Dr. Imani, Mixie for, Sister Mixie for really giving their background and all the work that they're doing and that they have done. My situation is honestly more really concerned. And so to answer some of this stuff is for the faith-based community, you got to remember it's what they're seeing, guys. It's not so much that they're not, man, Dr. Hurd, if you didn't say this any better, sis, I'm working with these people on the ground. Esther, Queen Nixie, I know you are. Dr. Imani, I know you are. You already talked about coming from the church and understanding that. And you said something, Dr. Imani, about, you still feel like a young person when you go into church, as you should, young lady, because those are the elders. So you definitely should be feeling like that. But it's not so much about, it's more about what they're seeing. And this kind of education is amazing because Dr. Hurd laid it down. This is not the cannabis that you all are speaking of. This is not the medicine. Dr. Hurd said, we can't call that medicine. It's not. I am seeing my Black and brown young people train wrecking, guys. Brooklyn, guys, Queens, guys, I'm all over the 5 boroughs and beyond. So the faith-based may even rock with you for a moment because Pastor Jamal Bryant out in Atlanta, he want to grow it right in his church, even though he has no clue. I know him very well, so he won't take this personal. He has no idea about what it does. However, we're witnessing these train wrecks on the ground. Our youth are killing themselves. Listen, drill music is because of what they inhaling. They are promoting it, they are using it, they're going back and forth with it. How do I know? I'm speaking to them regularly. So really, this is a great conversation for faith-based, amazing organizations that have to get involved. I love the tax piece. The DA even has something right now that is very, very serious about closing down those shops in terms of it being illegal. So Dr. Imani, you was on point. But we should have some young people on here, some people that are actually in the church or not in the church for that matter, that are actually like Esther Queen Nixie was saying, the work that CB10 is going to do and the work that they have done to really give us a true understanding instead of us just reading a lot of documentation. AAA, a lot of the concern for the church is driving while under the influence, which is heightened 69%. Come on, family, 12 million young adults. This is a growing concern, especially in our community. And I want to say to Dr. Robinson, scripture, 1 Corinthians 10 and 23. everything that is lawful is not profitable. Everything that is lawful is not expedient. I want to also say, Dr. Hurd said, there's different cultures. It doesn't work the same way. We've got to keep that into consideration as we're trying to bring these folks into the church and as we're trying to get the church on board with re-educating them, reimagining them. You've got to understand that from the traditional aspect, none of this is going down, except that there's something profitable for them. And then you got to understand that they have to know and understand it's still about what you see and what is going on right in there. The biology, Dr. Hurd said, is a platform. But why do we have to keep being guinea pigs until they get it right? Not my black and brown. No, we don't want to be these guinea pigs anymore. Not these young people that I'm seeing all through Brooklyn, all through Queens, 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue. Not going to have it. It works for China, Dr. Robinson. It worked. It is an old thing. It's an old understanding. But some things have changed and everything is not going to work the same way because of the different cannabis products. They're all not the same. Teens are not using this type of medicine. Dr. Imani said the money coming back into communities. Sis, I need to see that money, young lady. We need to see that money moving. I know, it's going to happen. We're very hopeful. No. The electeds want this to happen because it profits who? My young people, your young people that are out there, it is not helping them. They tell me, Pastor, I am not going to get a job. I'm out there trying to give them jobs, get them clothing, do whatever they need, get them trained, resumes. Dr. Punter knows. And they're like, no, we're good. We're going to sell this illegal marijuana. We're going to keep this going. I think that, yes, I'm in agreement with all of you on most everything, but it has to be given to them in a way that they can understand, because I believe it started as a bipartisan project and it's useful, but it's fiction if the people do, it turns fiction, but if the people that are being affected by it are not really benefiting from it, it doesn't work. And then last but not least, before I hang this up, is my last thing I want to say, not faith-based again, but those folks, those young folks that really need to be in the room, that really need to have these conversations. We can get some of those folks for you. I know the reason for the faith is I understand it, but we've got to really take another turn to really make this profitable for us, for our communities, for our people, and most importantly, for our young people. For our young people. I know medicinally, I have my odds and ends about that because I do see that some of it works, and I do see a lot of statistics where it's still hanging on, where it's still Arizona, for example, they'll give you a whole bunch of statistics where it just 2010, they legalized it, medicinal, 10 years later, recreational, and it's still not doing what it needs to do. So in closing, I would dare to say, meet me on the ground, each and every one of you. Come and talk to me with these young people. Come and start explaining to them, because they're right by the church. We trying to get them in the building. So we coming outside the building to educate them. Come and meet me there. And Dr. Mani, love you, sis. Whatever you got, come and see me. Queen Mixie, whatever you got, come and see me. I'm gonna be on that Zoom. I'm gonna get Charles to get me on that with CB10 so that I can really be helpful and bring some questions and concerns from the very young people. Thank you. Sorry, I was so excited.
Wow. I see both Queen Mixie and Imani, who wants everybody to know she's not actually Dr. Imani yet, although she might get a doctorate if people keep hanging it on
I'm
her.
like, is that a sign from above that I should get a
We
doctorate?
prophesying.
You
Doctor or
got-
something?
Somebody already pushed that in fruition. They already prayed on it for you.
That's right. We
telling you.
prophesying, sis. It's coming.
That is hilarious. Well, I want to say, Dr. Apostle Ramos, there's so much to unpack there. First of all, thank you for being open to the conversation, because I really think that's the first step, like not dismissing out of hand the power and potential of cannabis, whether we're talking about medicinal cannabis or adult use. I think you said a lot of things. I recognize a lot of the validity there. I will just say that when I think about cannabis and I think about young people, youth use, adult use. I actually feel like regulating cannabis allows us to get it away from young people. And part of what needs to happen now that we've legalized, and I want to definitely recognize other folks like Queen Mixie who are out there doing the work, educating people on the ground, is that they now need to know it's not just about like how much THC you can consume, that is ultimately not helpful, not productive, not the way to go. I think OCM is trying to start those conversations. There was an education campaign that, we saw branded on the subways and in public spaces where they're trying to bring some structure to the space and some order, but it's iterative. It's going to take time. It's not happening right away. I think when you think about cannabis as a medicine, though, I just want to point out, if you are, as someone who, is a medical patient, so I'm totally coming out of the cannabis closet now. Like, if you go into a medical dispensary, you'll see that their dosages in New York are much lower. So it's not just like, how can I get the highest potency cannabis around? As a matter of fact, for the processed items, the cap on THC is like 10 milligrams. So there absolutely are ways to leverage it as a medicine. Part of it is just having the discussion, making sure that there are health professionals there that understand cannabis, which is so exciting that Dr. Robinson and Dr. Hurt are here, being able to like open up the conversations in, your houses of worship so that your parishioners can go to their healthcare practitioners and have a conversation so that they can figure it out. And when they do become part of, if they choose to become part of the medical program, you can also go into a dispensary and receive some guidance.
Queen Mixie, because you were addressed as well. Quick, this is your shot.
Yes, so there's a lot to unpack. So for myself, I was a cervical cancer patient at 19. I'm also a mom of a 15-year-old, so there's different perspectives I come in. And I also went to Bronx Community College for pharmaceutical manufacturing. So one thing I do want to really stress about is when we're talking about cannabis and children getting cannabis, to put it in the right context. With speaking with over 2,000 students in New York State, most of the kids are not even really consuming real cannabis, which is not being said in this conversation and is being bucketed as actual legal and tested products. We have products in here, which is K2, which is a terminology, or spice as well, that is being in conjunction with actual real tested products. And then we're just categorizing it as actual cannabis, which is not. We also have hemp that's being sprayed upon to give that dopamine high or that high likeness, which is all chemically made. So I also really want to make that distinction, and that's where a lot of our kids are getting those, because I'm going to be very honest, a lot of kids are not just walking into a smoke shop. There are some children that are bold, but they're not all bold in that manner. We also need to take the part of, there are children that are dealing because of their circumstances, whether it be housing, whether it be this is a generational things, that those things are not being addressed as well, in which, why are they dealing? Why are they outside doing these type of manners? In addition, I also want to respect the fact that this is a plant that is used in religious forms as well and needs to be recognized. I'm in Southeast Queens, where we have the biggest Rastafarian culture out here, where some of these different type of religious or indigenous people are using this in a more religious manner. So when we're talking about this, we really need to start separating and educating in which context we're using these items, so that we can really have the conversation and also really come up with solution-based. But education is going to be the key in this conversation. Speaking with most students that I've spoken to actually started vaping before they even moved to cannabis. That's where they've been their first intro, or alcohol, because that is the closest thing that they can get, that don't have to go to a cannabis stop. They can go to a bodega. So when we're addressing these things, we really need to start unpacking the different areas of points of contact when we're talking about our youth and our students, and then addressing those issues and really putting them in the context in which they are doing it. And just like Ms. Dawson said, I am a cannabis patient. I go and I meet with a pharmacist. I have a prescription. I have a patient card. It says patient card on it. I go in there, the pharmacist, just like CVS, they go through, hey, what medications are you using? Is this working for you? Is this not working for you? And it's a process that you're going to learn, but also even in the medical community, a lot of them, because of their stigmatization, have not been willing to do the research in this space and really find out what the resources are with this cannabis plant in that. So that's why we're also having a lack of research, because there is still stigmatization in that space as well. Thank you.
I think
That
one of the
was excellent, Dr. Fuller. Just to be real
Yes.
quick for time, for the sake of time, it's 7:21, and I know that we have this till 7:30. I would love to get your thoughts and input on some of this before we go to the closing points, because we still have to do the poll as well as upcoming events. But I really do think that we would benefit from having you speak about something.
All right, very good. Well, let me simply say that the image that is out here is that instead of having to buy weed on the street, you can now go into a store, which for a lot of us who went through the drug times in the 80s and 90s sounds like pure chaos. I think the points that Imani and Queen Mixie have made are really critical, that there is much more regulation of all of this than I think many of us imagine. So it is not the same thing as being able to casually pick up and therefore engage in the kinds of behaviors that all of us recall from the crack era. Were really quite destructive to the community. Second point that I think really has to be made is that I was a part in 1992 to 1994 of what was called the Harlem Household Study. We were very much concerned about the health of folk in Harlem because an earlier article that had come from Harlem Hospital indicated that in the late 1970s, the lifespan of the average Black male in Harlem was only 49 years. You had less of a chance of reaching age 65 in Harlem than men in Bangladesh did. So there was a lot of concern. What's going on with the health of Harlem? We conducted a survey, a random stratified sample of the Harlem community, which means that it's pretty representative. And one of the things that came out of that study was the widespread use in the 1990s of cannabis. 60% of the folk that we surveyed basically said, yeah, I've used in the last month. And now, let's be clear, in surveys like this, people typically don't tell the truth. So the 60% is actually probably a low estimate. Why am I saying this? Because it's very clear that the use of substances has been with us since the dawn of time. And it has especially been true in Harlem, where folks weren't worried about being busted for smoking a little weed, and which it was already out there. So we don't want to act as if this is something new. Oh my God, marijuana just showed up on the streets of Harlem. Hello, hello. So as a result of a sudden change in everything having to do with laws, let's celebrate one fact. We are not going to have a lot of Black men and women in prison because they possess this. I have to tell you, the destruction that is wreaked on the lives of individuals because they've been incarcerated, and I don't have to tell folk in this audience, the kinds of damage that is done to our community. Now that we have a chance to literally learn how this process is going to work, now that it's clear that we're going to need education, we're going to have to bring more youth into this. We're going to have to get the youth point of view. Everybody is worried about what are young people thinking? I agree with Pastor Ramos. Let's ask them. Let's bring them in. Let's tell them, what are you hearing on the street? When you guys talk with each other about this, what's going on? What are your friends doing?
Absolutely.
I believe that that is probably the one area that touches the fears that I've heard just about everybody I've spoken to in Harlem about. We're not so much worried about adults using. We've been doing that. I think the whole question is what's going to happen with our kids. And now that we have that as a focus, and now that we're clear that at least the regulation that are going to govern how this is happening are really concerned with those sorts of excesses, let's figure out how to use them in a way that will not criminalize, but will make sure that the use of these substances will in fact be a boon to the health of the community and not something that's going to destroy it. Charles, how about I let you take over from this point?
Thank you, Dr. Fuller. So Very, very insightful, you all. This is unfortunate. I wish we could continue this conversation. This particular conversation, the first one, I think we could probably go on for another couple hours, which would be a great thing. But fortunately, just to respect everyone's time, we did say 7:30. So just to let you guys know real quick, this is, like I said, part one of an ongoing conversation. We plan on doing a 3-part series. So as you see here on the slides, you see that our next scheduled portion of this conversation is going to be tied into our second annual Cannabis Forum that's going to be on April 29th. This is our higher learning series. As you all know, last year we had a great turnout for the first one in Manhattan from community boards, and we plan on continuing that. So we will have a panel designated to continue the part 2 of this faith-based conversation at that panel. And then finally, on Monday, May 22nd, we're going to be continuing it via Zoom webinar as we have here with, like I said, continuing this conversation and moving it forward. So I'm really looking forward to that. You guys will be receiving the information and marketing once we finalize some things. So please make sure that you share this. If there's questions, concerns, things of that nature, please make sure that you include it in the Q&A, because we will be compiling those. And I apologize if we didn't get a chance to respond to any today, but we will be taking those questions in and making sure that we get some type of responses. So with
Charles,
that being said,
Charles.
Pastor Ramos, hold on. With that being said,
Thank you.
with that being said, I just wanted to thank everyone again. All of our partners, like I said before, Harlem Business Alliance, Marcus Meets Malcolm, Harlem Congregation of Community Improvement, HCCI, and again, special thanks to CUNY, to Harlem's Health Initiative, CUNY School of Public Health and Health Policy. Thank you, Tamisha, for being the MVP of this whole situation and helping organizing and get this together. Like I said, I've been talking about having an idea of this, but you really helped bring this to fruition. So I thank you deeply. And I'm not sure, Tamisha, if we were going to do the closing poll, if we had enough time to do the closing poll. Perfect. As you guys see here, if you could respond to the closing poll. We just wanted to try to get some feedback so we can make sure that we can critique this and move better with this. Yeah, everything that you guys say, we will be